So, Dr. Merrell, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to hear right out from the outset what your background is and how you got into integrative medicine, maybe starting with childhood.
Yeah, literally, it started early. I was raised in a very, very healthy household. My grandfather was in the Sierra Club and used to go mule packing, and we always had organic gardens at home. Well, they didn't call it organic then, but we always had gardens when we were growing up, very healthy. And I think one of the seminal moments was when I was, of course, didn't remember, told the story when I was a year and a half. We were living in San Francisco, and I got croup. And for those of you who've had kids with croup, it really looks like the kid is suffocating. It's like, and my parents freaked and called the pediatrician, who said, we'll get to the hospital. In 1949 in San Francisco, there really wasn't much of a way to do that. And so they ran across the street at 4 in the morning to this old retired 86-year-old German physician, Doc Klusman, who padded across in his slippers and robe and saw me and put 3 pellets under my tongue. And according to my parents, literally within 10 minutes, the croup vanished. And then it came back a little bit after that, then put 3 more in, and it was gone. So he used what a lot of people don't understand or think should be part of medicine, but he used a homeopathic remedy called aconite. And this is something that's used for high fevers and conditions like that. So my parents had never heard of it, much less ever had it practiced. But we moved out to the suburbs a year or 2 later. My father, who's a businessman, didn't know medicine much at all. He was so enthralled by what had happened out in the suburbs, nobody even heard of homeopathy. So he actually could speak German. He got books on homeopathy from Germany and got remedies sent over. Actually, we were raised with my father actually giving us homeopathic remedies whenever we had a sprain or bruise or sore throat. You don't use it for treating cancer and heart disease. It's just more for self-limited things. And then if we didn't get better in half an hour, then he'd take us to the pediatrician. So that was very interesting, kind of different background in terms of how I was raised. And actually, then I was fortunate to grow up as a kid in the 60s. So when I was in college, and we were, basically doing everything, experimenting wildly, I was really got into meditation and yoga, and ended up teaching it by the end of college, and was fascinated by this metaphysical practices of the quote-unquote East. And being a science jock, I was very curious to understand, was there a Western basis to these Eastern practices that would say, do a shoulder stand, you'll massage your thyroid and give you a better sense of energy and being. I said, well, okay, 2000, who figured that one out, that it was the thyroid with the shoulder stand? So I decided to go to medical school, really not so much become a physician, but more as an exercise to try to bring together Western science with Asian or Eastern metaphysical practices. And of course, back in the early 70s, that didn't exist. There are a few studies by Herbert Benson on the relaxation response at Harvard, showing the power using the mind to actually relax the body and its physiologic effects on blood pressure and breathing. But beyond that, there wasn't anything. So I threw myself into medicine. And then when I got out of my residency in medicine, then I went kind of back to my roots, because I really realized I couldn't help most of my patients who didn't have these terrible diseases that I've been trained at Columbia to treat. But mostly it was the worried well. They weren't sick, but they weren't well. They were, as I described it, many of them desperately working on getting sick. Most of it through poor lifestyle. And physicians are not really well trained in preventive medicine, almost at all. I ended up teaching a course in nutrition at Columbia to the 4th-year medical students. It was in 1995, and they knew nothing about nutrition. And the education in nutrition is still pretty much minimalist, if at all, in medical school. So doctors get out not knowing much about nutrition. So then I began to train, and I trained in acupuncture and herbs and diet and nutrition. We ended up having a course at Columbia for 10 years on botanical medicine, a CME course for doctors to teach them the utilization of diet and plants and botanical therapeutics for illness and for prevention. And taught the course for many years at Columbia, then opened the Center for Integrative Medicine in 2000. And so that's taking me near to the present.
Well, that's a gallop. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious about your parents. Did they create and concoct their own homeopathy, or did they have stores, or was there a lively community doing this in your area?
No, there was nobody at the time doing it. They had everything imported from Germany,
Oh, wow.
which is where it started. And it was a little bit of it in America, but few and far between. No place that was really selling Revity. So he had a local health food store in San Francisco import things from Germany, and he had a book that he would kind of use a cookbook how to.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. And are some of those recipes things that you know of now on the market?
Yeah, they still are here. Again, the foundation of health is lifestyle-based medicine. These are kind of probably the simplest adjuncts to helping a person if they're trying to get over a hurdle for things. But it's not the mainstay of what we think of as integrative medicine, which really is I'll define the term. It's a combination of the foundation is conventional Western bioscientific medicine for sure. I still do the same history and physical that I learned when I was a medical student. The only difference is I do a much deeper dive into lifestyle than most physicians would. And then we layer into that, when it's appropriate, obviously diet and nutrition, but also nutraceuticals, supplements, botanical, herbs, vitamins, lifestyle practices, body work, and I also incorporate what we call wisdom traditions, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and acupuncture, acupuncture is about 30% of my practice. I love giving acupuncture. Yeah.
No, when you were in medical school, you were something of a pioneer, it sounds like. And do you feel like you're still forging a new frontier for people? Or I know this is a widely known and sought after type of medicine to use supplements and so on. But in terms of your integrative practice, is this still a pioneering way?
50-50. You talked earlier the phrase the future of medicine. Really, the future of medicine is integrative medicine. It's actually really focusing on precision, personalized, lifestyle-based medicine, the foundation of health. You know, we spend $3.5 trillion on healthcare every year, of which 70% is for chronic disease, of which 50% is preventable, reversible just with lifestyle. So we really are missing so much of what, we have a tremendous amount of resources that we could spend on actually helping people, chronically ill people, to help to ameliorate their illness by themselves. Not that they can get off their medications or not instead of medications, but as an adjunct for health and healing, and hopefully early on when they know they have a risk of high blood pressure or diabetes to actually forestall that becoming an illness.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you've written this great book, Power Up. I recommend all of you look into it. And it contains 6 areas that can help us be happier, healthier, and more holy. Maybe that's your word. I don't know. But would you like to talk about this a little bit and guide us through some of these ways that you write about?
Yeah, so I wrote this book. Actually, my wife, Kathy, who's here, wrote the book.
Hey, Kathy.
And
it does say with Kathleen Merrell.
Yes.
But I notice her name is a lot smaller than yours.
Well, the marriage survived the first book, let's put it that way. So I'm not sure we're doing a second one, though, but that was it was a great success. So yeah, we wrote the book, really the first one to focus on the lifestyle, what I'm talking about. It's really an evidence-based dive into why these lifestyle-based measures are so powerful. I break it up into 6 fundamentals: stress, diet, reducing toxic load, exercise, sleep, and connectedness. Connectedness being to a higher power, to your spouse, to your pet. I mean, there are many ways of being connected and being fulfilled, and all of those areas have incredible, powerful. Not that you need clinical studies about prayer and religion, but they exist by the hundreds. What didn't exist when I first started seeking out in the 1970s is there are thousands of studies, and particularly in mind-body medicine, but also in nutrition and diet, really showing the power. There's a subcategory of integrative medicine we call functional medicine. And this is doing a much deeper dive into the root causes of illness. It's really going back to what we learned in medicine. You study the Krebs cycle and find out how all these vitamins and minerals fed into this pattern that was fundamental for life, for the creation of energy in our cells. You memorize it for the exam, and then that's it. You never apply it to your life ever. But it's the cornerstone of functional medicine. We go back to these biochemical roots of actually how the body sees food as genetic signaling molecules and how we utilize food to actually transform our physiology. So it's a much deeper dive. It's actually more conventional in a sense than conventional medicine because doctors really don't do don't do that dive. But each of those areas is incredibly important, and people ask me which is the most important, and it's really the one you're not doing. So if you're eating great and you're exercising every day and you're sleeping 3 hours, you're not going to get there. If your sleep is great but you're incredibly stressed in your life with very great difficulties with your marriage or whatever, and you're not eating well, it's going to be very difficult for you to be optimally healthy. Not that you can't get through it, and if you're genetically fortunate to be a healthy person, you may stay pretty healthy, but eventually something's got to give. So the sooner we can get rooted from each one of those categories and really manage things, the better it is. You know, I was fortunate also, I didn't mention this, but when I grew up, Episcopalian, the church we went to was run by a canon, Louis Douglas Canon Gottschall, and he was quite an interesting man. We had a very high church, incense and sanctus bells, and it was a lot of fun as an acolyte. Got to do a lot. Not that you don't do a lot here, but throwing the incense a thoroughfare around was a lot of fun. Anyway, one of the things that was interesting is every Wednesday he had a faith healing class, and people would come and literally for laying on of hands, which is for high Episcopal, so you think of as maybe more evangelical. Not that all traditions don't do it, but I was his assistant at these services for years and seeing people coming wanting to actually be healed by the power of faith. So that really inculcated in me at a really early time. It was just part of our life to figure that spirituality was the fundamental force that would guide us toward being be healthy and realize. So that's the root of it all. But then on top of that, you have to make sure that you handle, which is this great focus of this month, the physical body, in ways that the mind just can't always do it. You need to give it some help from a more physical perspective.
That's helpful. I'm struck by you're saying, you know, we're always looking for a silver bullet in our own health care, and I like that you said the most important thing is the thing you're not doing out of your list of essentials. And so a little sidebar, I want to stay on your areas here in your book, but when you consider the church and our practices, maybe the thing we're not doing is the bodily attention, and perhaps that's been talked about, how we're very cerebral, especially in the Anglican Church, and we're sensory in things, but there's a lot of passive reception for the average congregant. Is there some way that you would imagine the church being more integrated with our bodies in our faith practices? I know there was a yoga mass here yesterday,
start
so it's a one-off, but hopefully not. You know, I think that there is a place for that, but I would love to hear from you on ways that you think that would be integrated into our life together.
Well, I think the yoga mass is amazing for those who were there or weren't there. It was very, very powerful. At the end of it, we did this kind of sound healing with crystal bowls, and people were just, myself included, just way off. I don't know where I went for like half an hour, just really floating, coming out of it, feeling really quite blissful. So there are practices from all these spiritual traditions that are really, really powerful to incorporate into what we're doing. The Episcopal Church does it a lot. Well, I shouldn't compare with sex, but anyway, they do it very well often. So they're very open to things. So I think that's having the idea that on top of that, you can actually layer in other things that are really helpful for the body that make the mind work better, like diet and exercise is really important.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how about some more about these areas? What are ways that make us happier?
Well, food is one. I mean, they all make you happier, in a sense. I mean, people who exercise and then don't exercise often feel poor. And so it's a very. I'll just do exercise and I'll go back to food.
Yeah.
Exercise is unbelievably powerful. I think Duke did 2 studies about 10 years ago, comparing exercise to Zoloft. It was very interesting. So it was about 150 people, and they monitored them for 6 weeks. And what was interesting is the conclusion of the study was that Zoloft worked better. But when you look at the results, and one of the authors lambasted the conclusion, because you got to pick out when you look at these studies how people are coming at the conclusions, because the primary endpoint was after 6 weeks how people's mood changed. And the Zoloft went up. It takes a few weeks to work, but then it started really working well. Exercise was very slow. But what happened is when they looked at the outcome, the secondary endpoint, quote unquote, so that they didn't put in the conclusion, was 3 months how people were doing. And after about 5, 6 weeks, the Zoloft plateaued and even went down a little bit, and the exercise continued to get better. So by the end of the 3 months, the exercise was much more powerful than the Zoloft. They didn't put that in the conclusion, but it was there in the results of the study. So it's interesting. So exercise is incredibly powerful. People say, how can I get more energy during the day? Honestly, if you're sitting down, if you just get up and hop, do 3 hops, you can increase your energy. I mean, movement is really critically important for being healthy, and as we do it too little, it doesn't take a lot. There was one study that showed if people didn't exercise, just 15 minutes of a brisk walk 3 days a week would double the capacity of these things called mitochondria that are the energy factory in cells to double their production of energy at quick notice. And that's just a very brisk walk. It isn't like you've got to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've known that to be true in my own life. So food, that's a great topic, and next week we're going to do a bit of Bible study on food. So I would love to hear from you about what you eat, how we eat, and why it matters.
Yeah, it's very confusing, right? I mean, should I do vegan? Should I be keto? If it's keto, do I live on meat and bacon, or what do I live on tofu? It's really a conundrum. And part of it's individualized. So people ask, for example, about the blood type diet. Peter Diadama, who practices in Bridgeport, wrote this book. And some people do very well when they eat toward their type. Other people don't. So it's quite individual. But the fundamentals of having a plant-based diet is the case for everyone. We really have to have most of our food being plants. And then you can layer in what the proteins are and the healthy fats. For some people, keto works incredibly well. The body works very well on ketosis, on working on fats, and it burns fats, and the brain works very well with ketones for energy. So it works well, but the problem is people doing that often end up just eating fat and saturated fats, and which can be very counterproductive to trying to be healthy. So on the other end of the spectrum, I don't know if any of you are aware of the studies of Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish wrote an amazing book on studies that he did in 1993, actually, a long time ago, showing that if you did his program, which is meditating every day, exercising only 3 times a week, having a positive group social support, and the key is being vegan, he actually reversed fixed coronary artery disease. By 20%, actually, the plaque actually reduced. There's really nothing that reduces plaque. Statins prevent the progression, maybe 5% reduction. Only the Dean Ornish diet, to my knowledge, ever been shown to actually reverse fixed coronary artery disease. And that was almost 40 years ago. Just by essentially a vegan diet. He's gone on to show that it actually can help reverse adult onset diabetes, and other health conditions. And so vegan diet is incredibly powerful, but very difficult to do. So for most people, the sweet spot is not being vegan, but kind of what I call pesca vegetarian, or even Mediterranean, where fish is really very healthy, has a lot of healthy fats, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and that's essentially in like one sentence the core of what people should be eating for a healthy diet. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to be real healthy, but most Americans, the typical American has 2 or less fruits and vegetables a day. And the minimum amount to be healthy, actually, to stay nutritionally even, is 5 to 6. So most Americans are wildly deficient, which is why there's all this controversy. Should I be taking vitamins or not? Well, no, you should be eating food. Seriously, food should be your medicine. There's no way you could duplicate it in a pill. Particularly the phytochemicals. The phytochemicals in food are almost more important than the vitamins and minerals. Most of us get most of the vitamins and minerals we need, maybe not D in the winter, but we don't get a lot of the phytochemicals that are in food that are very healing. And things such as turmeric, for example, it is incredibly powerful. It's nature's gift to us. It actually is the most powerful anti-inflammatory that exists in nature. You can almost substitute it for Advil often, seriously. And it helps the body to eliminate toxins. It's an antioxidant, almost as powerful as vitamin C. So spices, in a sense, are almost more powerful than food because of the chemicals that they have in them. So actually, and this you get with cooking, you don't get it with taking a fistful of like turmeric and ginger pills, which a lot of people can't, buy enough of it at the health food store. Not that there isn't a place for supplements for some people, for some things, but really I try to get people to do it with food. And honestly, I'd almost rather have someone get a fresh juice with rainbow colors of the fruits and vegetables in it than to take a multiple vitamin.
It's hard to break a pattern of eating and learn a whole new way of cooking. And when I was a teenager, my parents had some health problems, and in Colorado there was the Seventh-day Adventist food retreat, not just food retreat, health retreat, and my parents spent 5 weeks there, and they came home totally vegan. And we had to clear all the cupboards and buy all this new packaged stuff and make milk out of cashews and, have our nut roast for Thanksgiving. And, it was very upsetting and really, very unsettling. And at the time, of course, there were nothing on any menu in any restaurant that accommodated this. And I worked for Travel and Leisure later as my parents were still doing this. And I took my dad on a trip to Spain, and we went to Salamanca, which is like ground zero for the roast suckling pig, and my dad said in Spanish, "Do you have anything vegetarian?" And they just were like,
wow.
"Well, we have toast," or, they had nothing. But it was funny, but I'm heartened today that it seems to be really getting into the mainstream, this idea of better eating and plant-based diets, and there are ways to learn how to cook with turmeric and ginger and things like that Western diets aren't so used to. So it's good to hear you talk about that, and I think it's something to think about in our own lives. That, fully alive means really taking up some of these hard lifestyle changes, probably, it sounds like to me. Could you, now our time is somewhat limited, and I know there will be questions, but we also want to ask you about the current COVID-19 outbreak, and if you have anything to say about it, and what things we could be doing or be aware of that can encourage us.
It's helpful to have a really balanced diet, which actually helps the immune system, which is actually obviously key to helping you fight off a virus if you get exposed to it. I won't go into the controversy about how strong a virus it is. I mean, most people who are healthy are not getting that ill, but if you have compromised system, or particularly elderly, it's definitely an issue. They're not nutrients that really are for COVID. It's about a healthy diet and exercise and getting enough sleep, because sleep is really powerful, really, really important for the immune system. It's interesting, between the 7th and 8th hour is when the optimum healing occurs during sleep. It's actually when the lymphatics in the brain, these little cells called microglia that are the immune cells that actually handle toxic inflammation in the brain. And by the way, it's interesting that now they've not just theorized, but pretty much proven that Parkinson's disease and ALS and MS are actually microbiome, gut bacterial mediated diseases, where the bacteria in the gut actually produce toxins that go up the vagus nerve, get into the brain, cause inflammation, and then whatever process is going to manifest itself does. So actually getting back to food and the microbiome is the balance of all the healthy and unhealthy bacteria and other organisms in your gut, and food actually makes a huge difference in the microbiome. In terms of, for example, artificial sweeteners will change the microbiome in terms of how it handles sugar. So some very simple changes you can make in your diet have profound effects. 70% of the immune system is in the gut, mediated by the food we eat and the bacteria that are in it that are fed by the food we eat. So it starts again with food and stress, which weakens the immune system. So you go back to lifestyle. And I don't think I want to talk about supplements here, because there are some supplements that help the immune system. For example, one of the most powerful immune stimulants on the planet, natural immune stimulants, are mushrooms. Reishi, shiitake, maitake, andrographis, astragalus, particularly Chinese mushrooms. And these are very helpful for helping the immune system. But you're not. It doesn't treat diseases. It's not going to cure pancreatic cancer. It's something you use preventatively. So you can use some of these things preventatively to help the body to be a little bit more powerful. Black elderberry, for example, has been published clinical studies showing that it actually helps kill the influenza virus. but nothing that we use that are zinc lozenges help kill viruses in the throat and bacteria at low concentrations. But you can't extrapolate that to something like the coronavirus. Although as a cold virus, these things may be useful, but the incarnation of it right now as this killer virus is something that you really can't tell people that, other than really being incredibly even more conscious of having a healthy lifestyle.
Right, thank you so much. Well, I know that people probably have burning questions that would spin off a lot of what we've talked about. So can we open it up now for a question? And Jill has the microphone. So please wait for the mic in order for the people streaming to be able to hear your question.
Okay. I'm so glad you said that a 15-minute walk 2 or 3 times a day is great, because I heard the only way you could get good exercise was to really sweat.
Well, that's true also. If you want to raise your metabolism and, for example, often significantly change neurotransmitters, you need to do aerobic, which would really be the equivalent of 30 minutes of raising your pulse rate to your target heart rate for 20 to 30 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week. So aerobic is better, but really you got to get moving. So I'll take walking, as a starter. It absolutely would be better if you're doing aerobic exercise for terms of other health benefits as well. But you get started by taking a brisk walk every day of 15 to 30 minutes is incredibly powerful.
Jill.
I'm interested in, you said that turmeric is an antioxidant. How much turmeric can you eat? I mean, it's a spice. You put a half a teaspoon in something.
Yeah.
And I'm
so
hoping
there
it
are
does
some
something.
things you're going to need to take as a supplement. Turmeric's one of them. You can't really have 2 teaspoons of turmeric every day. It gets a little old real fast. So I think that turmeric, it comes in capsules. Obviously, you can get mainly at the health food store. So this is one thing about quality I want to mention. Turmeric is a dirty spice. Most spices are. They're grown in places where sanitation is not the best. So, and it's the same thing with really all food. You really have to know your source. Factory farmed chicken and salmon, it's got so many toxins in it. It's almost like you're fighting off the food as much as you're using some of the nutrients in it to be healthier. And spices and herbs are definitely that way. So it's caveat emptor. You really have to know where you're getting yours. And there's an amazing, a wonderful health food store here in town. Buy local. Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more money, so you could get on Amazon if you want. But also, you don't even know there if it's been vetted. So your local health food store here is amazing, or Whole Foods, and you go in, and a conscientious owner will buy only those brands that they know have quality control. Studies showing that they don't have toxins. For A, they don't have toxins in them, and B, they have in them what's supposed to be in them. Coenzyme Q10, for example, which is used as a nutrient to help mitigate some of the side effects of statins and help the body produce energy better. It helps exercise recovery. It's very expensive. So if you're getting an inexpensive CoQ10, and they did studies actually in Consumer Reports, and they showed that 80% of the CoQ10 brands out there had 50% or less, some of them less than 10% of the CoQ10 that they advertise. So you really need to, even if you think you know what you should be taking or you've gotten advice, to know what you're actually buying, if it's a supplement, is really something you have to be careful about. It's the same with food. I mean, really, this is why people, I think, should be eating organic as much as they can. There's a great resource for this. The Environmental Working Group is unbelievable. It has a website, ewg.org, and on it they list all the safe food, all the safe household cleaning and personal care products. So the ones that don't have phthalates and parabens, artificial dyes, etc. And also the foods, and every year they come out with what they call the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So the 15 foods you don't have to have organic, which are the tropical fruits and citrus, where there's thick skin and the pesticides, although some gets in from the ground, most of it doesn't get in because it's sprayed. And then the brutally toxic ones, in terms of the toxic load on the fruit or on the produce, would be the thin-skinned fruits is a good example. The typical apple has 5 different pesticides on it, so it's not organic. So you kind of learn the foods when you're trying to reduce the overall toxic load that we're so subjected to now in the environment. Wheat, I can't tell you how many people have wheat, and there are papers now being published on the fact that of what they call non-gluten celiac disease, where people all think, gluten-free and they can't do wheat. Then they go to Italy and they eat all the bread and the pasta. Like, what's the big deal? They're fine. And so I think a lot of the time it's American wheat is a hybrid, and also it has 800% more glyphosate on it now than it did 10 years ago. So it may be like the Chinese restaurant syndrome was not the food, it's the MSG. It may be the actual chemicals that are in the food as opposed to the food itself, if you feel sensitized to it. So we always have to look, in terms of what your food is, and buying quality supplements, but also really thinking about buying quality food and produce.
The source. Yeah, that's helpful.
So
Okay.
I have
Probably did.
I have 2 questions. One is if you could comment on EMFs and the impact that it can have on our health. And the other thing I'm curious about is the cure-all du jour is CBD. And I wonder, as a people, because so many people tend to be taking it now, and there are so many products, and it does help a certain number of people with pain or whatever, but because everybody claims to have the most pure or the most effective, could you give some guidance or some thought on that as well?
Yeah, the first one was TMS, you mean transcranial magnetic stimulation?
EMF, electromagnetic.
Oh, EMF, electromagnetic frequency. Are they toxic in the environment, particularly now as 5G is coming in? I think that's a very controversial topic, and there's data on both sides of it, whether it's harmful or not. Putting a cell phone up to your brain, is it harmful? The standards for the penetration of the radiation from a cell phone is based, literally, the beginning of it, on the skull thickness that was done by the Department of Defense of a Marine. So that does not translate into a 5-year-old who is very thin skull, and you actually see photos in a 5-year-old of the EMF penetrating through the brain completely, whereas in an adult, particularly guys, it actually goes in maybe only a quarter of the way. So does that lead to disease? That's what's controversial. But I think that limiting your exposure, like using an earphone, would be a good start. Whether you need to move your alarm clock, 6 feet from you, that I can't really comment about. But the CBD, I'm a huge fan of CBD. I think it should, to a certain extent, certainly replace many opioids that are used. It's really one of the best substitutes for the opioid crisis. And Connecticut, it's licensed. So, I mean, you could go to a physician and figure out if it's a medical treatment that you should be utilizing for your health. I mean, it's fantastic for pain and inflammation, but it's also helpful for other conditions. But as a consumer, I think that, yes, there's kind of a feeding frenzy of people buying CBD of unknown quality. And but I think it's great that it's legal. You could actually, in a state like Connecticut or New York, you can actually go and see a provider and just determine if it's something you should use instead of or in addition to other things. And there's definitely drug-herb interactions. That's something that's also huge. Everything has a physiologic effect, so everything can be toxic to someone, even though for most people it's not, even certain foods. So I think the same thing is, particularly when you have more powerful physiologic agents from herbs like marijuana, you have to really think about what other things a person is taking. The herb-drug interactions become important when you have a more powerful herb like marijuana. But yes, I think it's great for pain and also for insomnia rather than using sleeping pills. Often people, it can be very helpful with CBD, with or without the THC part of it. Not everyone can handle THC. It can make people quite paranoid and et cetera. But the CBD is pretty gentle thing to use. But the problem is finding when you don't get a prescription for it, a legitimate source where it's uncontaminated and it's standardized.
Thank you for that. Who has the microphone?
Oh, I've got it now. Thank you so much. This has been fascinating and very helpful. I had my own health scare about 7 years ago, and I'm helping my father through one right now. And in both cases, the prescribed therapies actually didn't work. initially, and it wasn't until we sort of questioned the therapies as individuals that led to eventual therapies that then worked. And my question is, how do you best prepare yourself as a kind of a non-medical person to have a respectful and reasonable conversation with your caregiver about the best possible therapy for your condition?
Well, hopefully you're seeing a smart caregiver who might have a clue what works best, and also what the other options are, A, B, C of what could be possible, and giving you the one that they think is, first do no harm, the one that's the least toxic and the most powerful. That's why I love integrative medicine as the future of medicine, because you have so many things to choose from that are at least less toxic, produce less stress in the body if you're using some natural remedies. They shouldn't be used in place of conventional medicine. They're an adjunct to be blended together. What I do is I pick the remedy that's the safest and most effective. And if it's surgery or drugs, that's fine. But I'd rather it be food and meditation. You just have to know how to pick your tools. And it's the same thing with conventional medicine. It's very difficult. So much of medicine is, Dr. Mears knows better than I know in his field too, is a gray area. And you do the best you can with the data you have, but people respond so differently to the same therapy. And sometimes you don't even know what therapies are available. There's not a clearinghouse for information for a lot of people doing some of the research on this. So sometimes physicians actually have to almost Google themselves if you're looking for something esoteric or something new. Hopefully they don't live on Google, but they'll live on the published literature. But I think the most important thing is to have a dialogue, and the physician should really think of it as a partnership rather than the old-fashioned, guru thing, where there's a dialogue between the two of you, where you're trying to explore what would be the most useful thing. If you don't have a dialogue and openness with a physician, unless he's a world specialist, he's the only person you can go to. You should think about getting somebody else, because you really have to work with your doctor as a partner. There's a lot of gray area, and the ability to bad ideas back and forth. People come in every day, with a list of things from Google. What about this? What about that? So a lot of people get really bothered by that, but actually sometimes I actually learn. They're telling me something I actually didn't know. So, or I'll say I don't know, I need to look into it. So I'm curious always if there's something there that's useful that I don't know about.
Thank you so much. Our time is so short, and I just want to make sure that we end our time on tying up this, bringing together, rather, the Fully Alive. Our series has been about how all these areas of our lives, we're drawn deeper and more fully into the life in Christ. And here you are, this world sought-after practitioner of medicine, and you've studied the works of the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh and all these great mystics of the world, and you're also an Episcopalian. And I would love, there might just be one of you in the world in all these categories, but I'd love to just have you say a word about how your faith integrates into all these things that fill your spirit and fill your mind and help you help others. Why do you also follow Jesus, and what does this mean to you?
Well, he provides nurturing and a connection to be able to feel that there's something greater than myself, and I'm part of the universe as things were meant to be. I think the great thing about Episcopalian is that it's not restrictive. You're open to explore other things. So if one wants to explore Tibetan Buddhism and bring meditation into their practice, that's something that's only encouraged. So the latitude of what seekers can utilize and look for is always been something that's kept me. I was raised in it, but I explored every other tradition, all the other religions, and they're all great. I mean, I remember when I first read the Quran. And I had a good friend a long time ago, before we knew many Muslims. I thought, what an incredible, peaceful religion this is, Mm-hmm. So it really depends what you take out of it. So I think that all the books are great life lessons. But I think that being rooted in the tradition of Jesus. It's interesting. I went to an ashram, a Hindu retreat once, and the Hindu leader of it was saying to to us, you know, in the Hindu tradition, you kind of pick your god, and actually when you're young, you pick when you're growing up. In his family, they would pick a deity or person that they want to follow, and he picked Jesus. And because for him, he exemplified everything that he really wanted and needed out of life and a path forward. So he actually prays to Jesus as a Hindu. It's kind of interesting, this intermingling. But I think as personally, and part of the book is about connection, the deep power of prayer and connection with other people in a community, and having a faith that it's not just me, I'm part of something much grander, and there's a greater wisdom there that one can become part of, and that Jesus was an amazing person, amazing presence on the planet to be a guide. So for me, that's the deepest part of healing is spirituality. Again, I was kind of raised that way. I was lucky, but all these other factors, I think, mind, body, and spirit. Spirit is, I mean, they're all important, but spirit is the most powerful that'll get you through, better than focusing on bean sprouts.
Well, thank you. That's the bell. I think we need to wrap up, and I'm so sorry, but if you could linger 4 more minutes, maybe some people can come up and ask their questions to you. But thanks
fun.
for setting your clocks forward and arriving on time today. And next week we'll talk more about food and what the Bible talks about in terms of food. And thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Merrell.
you.
It's such a joy to have you.
Thank you.